Right, can everybody see the screen where it says webinar? Grace, will you confirm?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, thank you. Okay, this is the training for the webinar. And those clubs that are, those of you who have managed to do those courses, great, but you have got time to do it. The courses are grant management. And if you did grant management last year, you need to do grant management recertification. The second one is Rotary Foundation Basics. And the third one is Club Rotary Foundation Basics. That information was all on the email that was sent out to invite you to join. The Rotary Foundation. The motto of our foundation is doing good in the world. And I think quite a few of you have experienced the foundation in one way or another, whether it is seeing how the foundation has been so successful with the polio program, the Peace Scholars, and the district and global grants. So we are really fortunate that we have a foundation that is so well respected. The mission of the Rotary Foundation, as you can see here, is to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding, goodwill and peace through the improvement of health, the support of education, and the alleviation of poverty. The primary source of funding for the humanitarian activities from clubs and local service projects have led to these global initiatives. I mentioned about the polio program, how successful the foundation has been with it. Our foundation stands at the forefront of humanitarian service, having supported thousands of projects to provide clean water, fight disease, promote peace, provide people with basic education, and of course, the eradication of polio. And the eradication of polio was a promise to the children of the world. You can see the foundation was initially started in 1917 by the 6th president of Rotary International, Arch Clump. And it all started off with $26.50. Today, the foundation is working with over $1 billion US to do good in the world. The foundation is phenomenal because it has lasted more than 100 years. And it still continues to help societies that need the support of Rotarians and of the Rotary Foundation. A quote from Arch Clump: "We should not live for ourselves alone, but for the joy in doing good for others." And that he said in 1929. During the presentations, I'm going to give you a brief view of what the foundation is about, how it gets involved in its humanitarian work, and how you, as Rotarians, can make a difference utilizing the foundation. Why is the foundation so phenomenally successful? Well, if we look at it, 92% of the funds that are into the foundation are utilized for programs. A very, very small amount goes to the operations. There have been phenomenal recognitions from organizations like the Charity Navigator. For the past 12 years, it has rated the foundation as #1 of the 10 charities that everyone has, and that verbatim. And that is in recognition of our exceptional impact, our accountability, and our transparency. That's why it's important that when we are dealing with foundation funding, that we don't have any conflicts of interest, that we are very aware of the best manner to have these funds allocated to the projects to get the maximum out of it. And the reason for that is we receive our funding from Rotarians from around the world. Yes, we as a district and as Rotarians contribute through our clubs, raising funds through the communities, through CSI programs, or from outside donors, people who recognize the foundation as being one of the organizations that they put up number one when they are looking to be benefactors and to support organizations such as the Rotary Foundation. CNBC is another one of those organizations that has recognized the work that the Rotary Foundation does. This next slide, I don't know how much of it you can see, but it explains to you exactly how the funding works and how we receive the funds from the Rotary Foundation. We make donations, and as I mentioned, whether they are personal or whether we raise the funds through communities, and those funds get put into the annual programs fund and are invested for 3 years. At the end of the 3rd year, we go into the share program. And what is the share program? It divides the monies that we have contributed and others that have been donated to us through the benefactor program or the bequest society, where certain bequests have been made, that the funding that has been donated, some of it is the growth comes back into our district to be utilized on programs within our district. So the money gets split 50-50. 50% goes to the World Fund and 50% comes to the district designated funds. Those are the funds that we utilize as Rotarians to fund district grants and global grants. Now, through the World Fund, we get the matching that comes from the Rotary Foundation. And that is where the difference really comes into the whole process. If we just take a quick example, let's assume we've contributed $100,000 3 years ago. $50,000 come in under our district designated funds, the DDF. Of that, 25,000 goes to district grants, and I'll be talking about those later on, and 25,000 comes to global grants. The World Fund will match the foundation's district designated funds dollar for dollar. Now here's a very big change that has taken place this year. Because of the extra programs that the foundation has been involved in, and we'll discuss those later, and the phenomenal success of global grants, the foundation is not able to match cash funding that we put into our global grant applications. The way to go around this is to have partners, the international partners who come in and support us on our global grants, to get their districts to supply and to support us with district designated funds. Later on, I will go into the details of how the global grant is put together and how the funding for the global grant works. You see here a very, very recent slide, our 7 areas of focus. We've always been talking about the 6 areas of focus. And you can see them there, and if you note, the very last one at the bottom, supporting the environment, that comes into effect on 1 July 2021. Between now and 2021 July, we will be hearing a lot more about how we can support the environment through global grant programs. This has been a phenomenal change that has taken place. I was responsible at one of the council legislations, and I took forward the proposal from Rotarians that the environment becomes one of the focuses of Rotary International. Pastor Governor Annie Stein also went to the council legislation, and that was brought up again, and again it was defeated. But the foundation has been proactive, and they have taken the bull by the horns and have given us the opportunity to support our environment and make sure that our children will have a future that will be worthwhile. Our causes, if you have a look at those causes, you will identify a number of projects that you're already involved in. So if I revert back to the term, the 6 areas of focus is not something new. It is something that we need to support, to use, and to do good in the world when we are working with foundation funding. The impact of our donations. Here's a few examples that will make you understand what it is about. The first one is 60 cents will protect a child from polio. $50 will provide clean water. And under the circumstances of coronavirus that we are experiencing, that clean water is essential to protect communities from COVID. Very exciting project that was done up in Uganda was an anti-bullying campaign. And if you read our newspapers and you see what is happening in our schools, bullying is one of the biggest pandemics, if I can reuse that word, that is taking place. There's no respect for persons' way of living or way of doing things. And that $500 made a phenomenal difference to those schools up in Uganda where the anti-bullying campaign was launched. We've spoken a lot about the polio eradication, and as I said, later on, Grace will give us a little bit of a promo and related to the polio program, and specifically the polio-free Africa situation that we are now experiencing. So thank you for doing good in the world. And as I said, this will be our first break. So will you please come back onto your screens in the next 5 minutes. If you be global grants and the other being district grants. I'm going to start with global grants because if we do run out of time, I would like to have made the point of getting the most important elements of a global grant across to you. District grants are a lot more casual, if I can use that term. They don't have to comply to a lot of regulations that have been set up, or guidelines I would rather use, the foundation has set. So let's go straight into it. A global grant is most definitely a long-term project. It is important that it has sustainable and measurable outcomes. And the key feature of a global grant is partnerships between districts or clubs where the activity is carried out, and they will be regarded as being the host partners, or a district or club in another country, and they would be the international partners. The minimum that's required to put together a global grant is $30,000 US. And throughout my presentations, please note, we are referring to US dollars. It's a lot easier than having to convert to the rand term. To get a match from the foundation, the host organization must have a minimum of $15,000 US, because that is what will be matched by the Rotary Foundation. Our district designated funds, as I mentioned earlier, will be matched dollar for dollar. And at this present, for this year, cash contributions will not be matched. Another important change that has taken place is that the international partner needs only to contribute a minimum of 15% of the funding. Previously, it used to be 30% of the funding. So this will necessitate that we have a number of international partners who can assist us. There are, however, many districts right throughout the Rotary world where they have got large balances in their district designated funds. And I think the foundation is also encouraging them that these funds are utilized and taken out and be used for projects. Global grants support humanitarian projects, scholarships, vocational training teams. There are a number of programs that you can get involved in. Again, we look at the 7 areas of focus. And as I mentioned to you, we only at this present moment focusing on the 6 areas. When we're talking about global grants, sustainability is the keystone of putting a global grant together and making sure that the funding will be there for long-term solutions. There are many different definitions for sustainability, but the Rotary Foundation provides this or asks us to look at sustainability to provide long-term solutions for community needs so that the beneficiaries can maintain long after the grant funds have ended. There are 6 steps that one really needs to look at when one starts and considers the sustainability of a global grant program. The first thing is you start with the community. There have been a number of clubs that, and I don't say they are here today, but we tend to go into a community and say to them, we've come here to help you. We have the resources. We have got certain ideas of how we can make a difference in your communities. And I think we've got to be very careful about this, that we're not paternalistic. We've really got to look at what it is that is important to that community. And when you're working with that community, you've got to work with all elements of the community. An example that I brought up previously is a project that took place in India. It was a global grant, and it was to fund a borehole. And what was the purpose of the borehole? Well, in that community, the ladies would go off in the morning, go down to the river, which would be a mile, a kilometer or so away, maybe even longer, further out, and they would collect water and bring it back to the village. So the village elders thought, well, this is phenomenal. With us getting a borehole, we can save our ladies from this burden of going down to the river and having to bring back water. What they did not realize is that the purpose of going down to the river was not only to get water, it was a way for the communities, the ladies and the children to interact and to be social with each other. Now, it's not that they couldn't do that when the borehole was put into place, but if they had been consulted and they had been brought into the whole discussion, it would have been a lot more acceptable, as opposed to the elders telling us what it is that we should do. So the community assessment is essential. To encourage local ownership. I was very fortunate when I first joined Rotary. I was involved in a global grant program. The success of that particular project was that we involved the community. We set up a Rotary Community Corps, RCC. And the purpose of that corps was to get people within the community to set up a committee, to be headed by them, from one of them on that committee, and for Rotarians to be there to mentor and support the Rotary Community Corps. This way, the program and the project that was put into place, and this was to build a school, was their project. They designed it, They raised funds for it through the support of Rotarians. They went and got a brick making machine and made the bricks. The Rotarians supplied them with the structure, the metal frame for the school, and they built the school. That school today is still functioning. In fact, it's turned into a community center. So that is why it's so important to bring in local ownership. We were talking about the borehole earlier. Boreholes are mechanical mechanisms. They can break down. So in your setting up of your global grant, you must provide training. You must have somebody within the community who will be able to repair that borehole if it breaks down. When you're talking about the actual repairs that are going to take place, you've also got to make sure that there is funding in place so that, again, the community do not end up with a dud borehole because there are no funds to repair it, or having to come back to the Rotary Club and cap in hand say, please, sir, can I have some more? So these are very important steps that we need to take. Obviously, buying local will make sure that the maintenance and the equipment and the technology that is available can be easily maintained and kept going. Funding local funding, that is very, very essential, because if we go to our NGOs, to governments, to other companies who have CSI programs and so on, they can see the value of what the program, the global grant, can bring to that community. And of course, it will help us with our funding. The measuring of success. It is so important that this is put into place. And when you put in your report, which we will discuss a little bit later in the one breakout session, you will see that you need to gather the data before you begin the project. So you can determine where you're starting from. Include clear and measurable outcomes in your project plan, and decide how you'll collect data throughout your projects and afterwards. This may necessitate working with other organizations, and by doing that, you would need to have a memorandum of understanding between them so that everybody understands what the responsibilities are of each and every person or organization involved in the program. And the oversight must be through the foundation. So that takes us to the type of programs that we can now utilize and bring about global grant funding to help communities that need that support. Scholarships. We've been very fortunate in the earlier years when we were doing matching grants that we were always given an additional scholarship to the one that we were funding. Now that we're under the global grant program, the funding has got to be considered exactly as you would do a global grant. The difference being that whoever you are supporting with that scholarship is going to come back into the community and going to pass on the benefit of what he or she has learned and has studied to the benefit of the community. Here's an example of a vocational training team that went to Nepal. It was a group of health professionals, and they received training on emergency care and dialysis treatment. In the webinar that's going to follow on the 31st of October, the vocational training teams will be explained in much more detail. Now we come to district grants. These are a lot easier to put together. They're small-scale grants, short-term. Can be a local or an international activity. They do need to be aligned to the mission of the Rotary Foundation. And these grants are awarded to the district on an annual basis. What happens is a deadline will be set for applications to be sent through to the foundation committee. It is normally around the middle of May. What happens before that is Rotary clubs are asked to go into their communities, see what project they need to create or bring about, and put in an application for funding for a global grant. I mentioned earlier that if we contributed $100,000 to the share program and we got 50 into our district designated funds, where in turn 25,000 ended up in district grants, you can understand that as a foundation committee, we do not have a lot of funding that we can provide. So we do, in our recommendations, suggest that clubs put in their own funding, raise funds through, again, CSI programs, other partners, whether they're international or local, but most probably local. And that way, an amount of funding will be given to them. These funds, or the applications will then be sent to the foundation as one block grant, the block grant being a total of $25,000. The actual projects will be accepted. And then around the 1st of July, possibly 1st of August, the foundation will send us our $25,000. I mentioned earlier that if we have any benefactors who have contributed and have donated their funds to the district, the growth in those funds will also be included. So we might end up with slightly more than the $25,000 that we originally were going to get from the share program. The interesting thing about these projects are that they need to be completed relatively quickly. If you think about it, your application comes in May, the funding arrives in August. So by the end of October, those funds should have been expended. Once you have received all your funds from the district committee, you will then, I as the foundation chair will be able to put in the application and close off the grant so that we can get ready for the next one in the following year. To get funding, as I mentioned earlier, from the Rotary Foundation, districts have to be qualified. And this is a process where the leadership needs to complete a memorandum of understanding, accept the conditions of it, and send it through to the Rotary Foundation. But clubs also need to be qualified. And where the real difficulty comes in is I get an email, or the foundation chair will receive an email or communication from an international partner. An international partner will ask, is Rotary Club ABC qualified to receive foundation funding, and may we partner with them? If the clubs have not gone through the foundation training grants program and have completed the E-line training that I mentioned earlier, I cannot answer and say, yes, this club is qualified. So it is very imperative that clubs qualify every year. And I think with the e-learning that we have got and the facilities that they provide us with, this is becoming a lot easier. There are many resources where you can get to promote your project. Rotary Ideas is a process whereby you can put your program onto a website, and Rotarians can come back and find out more and how they can partner with you. You'll find that the Indian districts are phenomenally successful in this. And if you do go in under Rotary Ideas, you will find that they have got many projects that they promote and get funding for. There are other things, Rotary discussion groups, Rotary action groups, The inter-country committee. We've been very fortunate that we have an inter-country committee which is named ICC Germany and Southern Africa. What happens here is that this committee puts out the programs or the projects that you have to its district. And the district, sorry, I was one slide behind. And the district will then promote these to the clubs, who then will make contact with you. It's a good way of getting international partners. The International Country Committee, Germany, Southern Africa, has been one of the major drivers of the early child development projects in our district, in fact, in Southern Africa. So if you've got those type of programs in mind, please utilize this. Project fairs is another way to get this information. Right, we will take a short break. Okay, now that I spoke about district and global grants, I'd like to bring to your attention the support that the foundation has been given to a number of disasters that have been taking place around the world. And as far as we are concerned, Cyclone Idai that devastated Mozambique, northern Mozambique. Our district leadership was very proactive. And when they heard that there is such a grant being put into place as the disaster grant, they put in an application for the $25,000 to support Mozambique. We were the very first district in the world to receive a disaster grant. And the number of that grant was DR1. The funding was given to 3 clubs in northern Mozambique, and it was coinciding at the same time with COVID. So they were able to immediately support their communities with personal protection equipment, sanitizers, a borehole to provide clean water to one of the communities that were affected by Idai. And yes, it did take a while for these funds to be expended. It was just over a year. As I mentioned earlier, once the funds have been expended and the report has been finalized, the foundation will allow us another disaster grant application. And what has happened since then is last year, our foundation chair, together with the Rotary Club of Johannesburg New Dawn, put in an application for a disaster grant, which was granted to them. So that is another $25,000 that is coming to our communities. You can see the numbers on the screen. 268 disaster grants have been funded right throughout the Rotary world. It then begs the question, why is it then that the foundation cannot match our cash contributions? Well, it's a rhetorical one. You can see by doing good in the world, the foundation has looked at where the emergencies lie and where the funding should go. And it is a program that has had immediate results. 169 global grants during the last Rotary year. Phenomenal response to the global grant program. And then $20 million for COVID-19 aid and relief. So if anybody had to ask you, does your Rotary Foundation support disasters, emergencies, and matters that need attention other than the long-term program like the elimination of polio, you can very proudly let them know what it is that the foundation is doing and how much they accomplish. We're now going to go on to the next one, which is the scale of the program of scale grants. These are very, very large projects. They cover a very big geographical area, and the award for this particular program is $2 million US. The program would be aligned to the areas of focus, and the time period for this particular grant of scale would be 3 to 5 years. What happens here is, and one of our, our Southern African districts put in an application for a program of scale grant. And that was to fund the Rotary Family Health Day program. We were, together with many other districts, competing for this $2 million US. And although we were not granted it, it allowed us to showcase what it is that we are trying to do in our communities. $2 million US is on a competitive basis, and only one gets awarded per year. What happens is the applications must all be in by the 30th of June. And when the trustees meet in October, they adjudicate as to who will receive this funding. It is very important that when one goes into this type of program, that NGOs, governments, and private sectors are also involved. And that is why we put in the application for the Rotary Family Health Days, because of the excellent partnership that we have with our government in helping the communities with their health issues. We finished off a little bit earlier, and I'd like to just open it up. If there's anyone who has any question on what we have discussed at this present moment, to please, I don't see if they can put up their hand, but if you can just indicate, come on, switch on your video and ask your question. Just mention your name, who you are, and then I will address you. Sybil?
Hi,
Hi.
yes, I'm Sibylle Guzman from Rotary.
Hi, Sybil.
Hi, from Rotary Centurion. Is there any other scale grant that you are looking at in the future?
As far as I'm aware, there aren't any at this present moment. But if you do have anything in mind, I would recommend that you contact the district leadership and let's have a discussion on that, because as you notice, we are now in the putting applications, and that will only be accepted in June 2021. So we have a period of time to plan ahead for that particular scale of grant that you might have in mind, and maybe we can be successful. Yes. Okay.
Would that include, I'm just thinking theoretically, but with, you know, environment or environmental issues becoming another leg, if one were to plan something in that area, would that be a possibility? Because it comes into effect next July.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. I don't know if it was my first slide where I had the solar farm being indicated. Let's face it, that could be something that could provide renewable energy and all the associated support that could come from that renewable energy. In agriculture and the environment, so many things. Yes, I would suggest that that would be something that one can take into consideration, because as of 1st of July 2021, we will have the environment as being an area of focus. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, pleasure. Thank you. Great.
Greg,
Any other question?
Greg,
Yes.
how, how has the COVID lockdown impacted on the timelines for grants in terms of projects that are already in hand, and the prospect for then extending the timeline on those things, because they've been put they've been restricted in terms of implementation because of lockdown?
Okay. Julian, yes. Look, when I mentioned sort of a timeline, I only referred to the district grants. And the only reason why I brought that up is because by that time the project, would have been in place. But if it does go a little bit over that time and it goes into the new Rotary year for that matter, what is important is that reports are sent in, and the final report will only be sent in 2 months after the completion of the project. When it comes to global grants, there are no timelines. Again, it's just a matter of letting the foundation know if you receive your funding a year ago, your report must go in. It might be an interim report, and then only when the project is completed, 2 months later, will the final report go through. But certain of the global grant programs and projects have extended to even 2-3 years. There is no deadline in that regard. Have I answered your question? Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I think
Hi,
now.
Greg.
Yes, sorry, Felix. Hi.
Yeah, Greg, this is Felix here. Yeah, from Rotary Club of Morningside. You spoke about 15% of funding, which has to be done by the international partners. Can you explain a bit about that for global grant, for the global grant application?
Yes, I'm not sure why 15% was it's been reduced to 15%. It used to be 30%. Again, there's no explanation why there would be a minimum. In most experiences of grants that I've handled over the years that I've been in the chair, the international partner has mostly supplied the greater portion of the global grant. So the 30% and the 15% were not really any restrictions on it. The important part is that if that funding, and especially from here onwards going forward, is from district designated funds, then it's matched dollar for dollar. So the percentage is not a major issue, no.
Okay. No, thanks.
Can I talk?
Yes, sure. Who's that?
This is Maria Angelica from the Rotary Club of Maputo.
Welcome. How are you, Maria? Are you well?
I'm fine. Yes, thank you. After Idai and Kenneth cyclones last year, we are facing the north of Mozambique social unrest. My question is the following. Could we try to request something or to address something like a disaster fund, a disaster grant? Could it be considered that we can provide some support to these populations and special grants?
Maria Angelica, I think yes, you can. If you think about it, you've got in the area of focus, you've got peace, which is one of the very important elements that we need to consider. So yes, if you can put a global grant or a disaster grant application together, we can try, because there's only one per district that is allocated. As I mentioned earlier, we have got one at the moment that is going to be put into effect. So once that one is finalized, or the report is sent in, the final report is sent in, we will be able to do a second one. But maybe you could even consider a peace scholar that will be able to help in the northern of Mozambique area, especially the unrest that's going on there. And that particular person could come in under a global grant application.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay, I think we can now go into our breakout rooms. I will ask Grace to get the process going. Grace, do I need to do anything on my side?
No, Greg, everybody just needs to click the join button as soon as it shows on their screen so that they do get allocated to the correct rooms.
I presume that also includes the
Facilitate.
facilitators.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm going to open the rooms now.
Thank you.
Morning, Greg.
Good morning. Are we in the work break room?
Yes, we are.
Morning,
Good,
Greg.
good. Hi.
Morning, Greg.
Hi, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Caroline, can I share a screen here?
You should be able to just try, otherwise I'll look at it.
Okay. Let me see where we are.
Yeah, we're getting your screen now.
Okay. And can the reading be read?
I-
The writing
yeah.
be read?
Clear.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you tend to get a little bit tongue-tied here.
Greg, perhaps maybe if you reduce your page size, you
Yes.
get the whole thing in at once without yeah.
Yeah, I really want you to be able to read it because, you know, sometimes you get a screenshot and it is very difficult to see what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure how many people we've got in our room, but thank you. And as I explained earlier, we will be doing here the matters around putting a planning for a global grant. The form that you're looking at is the global grant application template. Now, this particular template is available to you to download, as I have, or you can go online and follow the steps, the basic steps, right through when you're putting your global grant application together. It is very important that this is followed all the way through, because not only do you have the situation, sorry, my glass is causing a problem here. Okay, you don't only have the situation that one can be very quick in your planning and leave out steps, which may lead to delays in your global grant application being accepted. I was on a webinar not very long ago where the one of the Argentinian clubs was talking about the global grant applications. And from the time that they uploaded the global grant application to receiving the funding, it took 6 weeks. So that is pretty good. So if everything is in place that I'm going to go through now, and I won't be able to go through every little bit of detail, you will find that your application will be strong and it will be accepted. So let's start. The most important thing is obviously what type of project are you planning? And this comes back to what I discussed earlier about your community assessment and the fact that this has got to be a program that is going to be lasting, that the community has bought into it, that there is the sustainable element that is available. So the first thing you've got to do is you set up your committee, which should be at least 3 Rotarians. And the purpose of that is so that there is continuity. Because I mentioned it earlier that certain grants can take a number of years before they are completed. But your international partner is critical to this whole program. And again, if you have more than one international partner, whether it is a club or a district, they are going to also have to set up the same type of committee as you have. Having an international partner means that you really need to get involved. You have got to let them have information. You've got to keep them updated. They must feel as if they are 100% part of the project. They should not just be utilized because they are now all of a sudden going to be giving you funding. So it's very important that you have a good relationship with your international partner. Carry on a little bit further. I mentioned about the committee members. Project overview. It must obviously fit into the 6 areas of focus. And as I mentioned, from the 1st of July 2021, also bringing in our 7th area. There are guidelines when you are online to go in and links to go to explain to you exactly what is expected when you are doing, for example, a peace building and conflict prevention project. It is so important that you understand what it is that the foundation is requiring to be able to fund that particular program. So I would always draw you to that information to have a clear understanding of it, because it will eliminate a lot of PT work and stress if you have to keep on going backwards and forwards with the foundation making suggestions. Have you considered this? What if you looked at it in this manner? They are there to support us, and they do it in a very, very positive manner. But if you've done your homework well, this will be very important. Another thing that is important is not to use a number of areas of focus, thinking that that will be the way that the foundation will be so impressed that they are going to just give you the money. It did happen in the earlier years, I'm sorry to say, but I think our Rotarians are becoming wise to that now. Because what happens is, with every area of focus that you use, and yes, they might be related, you might have 1 or 2 that have to be utilized. You've got to go through the sustainability, the community assessment, and all the other steps that we're going through. So it's so important that you make your work relatively easy, but very precise. I mentioned about the measuring of success. That is imperative. I've seen a number of grants where what has come across is we have got an NGO and they will be doing the assessment, and they will be drawing up all the information. It's great that you have somebody who's supporting you, and as I mentioned, an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, must be signed between the parties. But it becomes your responsibility as a Rotarian, as a Rotary Club, to have that information. So again, make sure you've got Rotarians involved. The more your Rotarians are involved, the more they buy into the whole program, and the more you will have a successful program and project. There are guidelines there on how to measure and so on. That is all given to you. I'll skip a few steps, and then we get to the budget. You'll notice that there are steps regarding vocational training teams, cooperating organizations, what you need to do. There's a memorandum of understanding that can be utilized. You can also draw up one depending on how technical you want to make it. I was involved in one where we put in so much detail that the cooperating organization came back and said, no, we're not doing this. This is far too technical. Rather, let us send us our MOU. And it was so much more to the point. So you've got to be careful not to be too pedantic when it comes to these things. Allow your partners to also assist you, because they might have that experience where we don't have it. Okay, when it comes to the budget, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to understand that you've got to have, if we can think of it in this sense, sorry, I'll just go back one step. You've got a left-hand column and you've got a right-hand column. On the left-hand column are the funds that you as a district, as a club, with your partners are going to put in. The total in the left-hand column must come to $15,000 US. Let's assume a very simple thing. You come to the district and you say, I've got this project. Can I have 15,000 US dollars? The district says, yes, we've got DDF running out of our ears. We will give you 15,000 US dollars. So the left-hand column has got 15,000. The right-hand column is where the Rotary Foundation through the World Fund matches those. So you end up with 30,000 US dollars. At today's exchange rate, at 1709, it's a considerable sum of money. But that is the easiest way. And here I must be very honest with you. Our district is running out of district designated funds. We are not getting enough contributions during the year to the annual programs fund to be able to provide such quantities of funding. So what most probably will happen in reality is that you will find that the district will be able to give you between $1,500 and $2,500 US dollars, because we've got to stretch whatever funding we have to as many Rotary clubs and as many projects as possible. There may be exceptions, but please understand that the district is very limited in its funding. So it's so important that you make contacts with the international partners who have much larger funds than we have. Obviously, everything is in US dollars. So if you're dealing with a club in Germany, you would convert that to US dollars. All the details of your grant would be put in there. Your funding, your sources would be indicated in this regard as well. We mentioned a lot about sustainability, and I think here we can go into a little bit more detail. And again, when you are looking at this and completing it, you have got those links that you can go to, which will help you to understand exactly what the foundation means by sustainability, to your points. And again, if everything is done correctly, you will be very successful with your application. So community needs, you know, you've been through that assessment. That is absolutely imperative. How did your project identify these needs? How were members of the benefiting community involved in finding solutions? I gave you that example that you got to talk to stakeholders. Anybody got a question there, or was it just, okay? How were the community members involved? I mentioned about the Rotary Community Call. It's one of the most successful programs that we can use and the most least utilized in getting global grant funding. The steps of your projects, you'll put those in there. Describe any training, community outreach, educational programs. Any type of global grant application that focuses on training, that focuses on education, will be more successful than one that does not. The other thing that you must also be wary of, we had an instance with one club where the project application was put through, and the comment from the Rotary Foundation coordinator was, this is a project of ABC organization. It is not a Rotary project. You've got to be very careful that you are not funding a project of another organization. What you can do is you can change the language and you can put it in such a manner that it will be a project that Rotary is supporting and Rotary is funding, together with the cooperation of the cooperating organization, the NGO, whatever one you're using. So that is a very, very important element to take into consideration. Incentives implied. We also talk here about conflict of interest. Conflict of interest does not mean that if a Rotarian wants to supply products or resources to the global grant, that he may not be considered. As long as you've looked at other organizations or other suppliers, and if the Rotarian is not necessarily the cheapest, because cheap is not the best thing. We're not looking to take a type of program or a project and resources that are not going to be sustainable. There might be all the reasons why this Rotarian will be able to supply, to produce a reasonable cost, and to provide the service long-term compared to another organization. So please use your Rotarians. They are your sources that will be able to help you the easiest in getting together. And list community groups that oversee, I mentioned that would be your cooperating organizations. Okay, the form, as I said, is quite comprehensive. If you're doing a scholarship, you can see all the details about how to go about a scholarship. And again, you will have the link to go to further explanations of what you need to do. All right, that is my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'd like to open it up and ask you to please comment on those issues that I mentioned to you. Who will be first? Just unmute yourself and then come forward. Sabine, have you got a question?
Not at the moment.
Or a comment, please.
What are you talking about? The two of us.
Yeah.
I've got a comment.
Yes, who is that?
Yoland.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. Greg, I think you were very well aware of the one that we did this last year for Ikadelus. We went through it. And I think what we learned out of that whole thing is that we have to be very careful with the size of the project. I think ours fell down because, or was not successful purely because I think it did not include enough of the community. And I think that's key when doing these global grants. So we went through the process, lots of work, but it was really a very interesting process. Yeah, and it's actually pretty easy. I mean, once having gone through the process, the next one will be very easy, I think. But I think the size of the project is, and how much of the community are going to be included in the project. I think that.
Yolandi, thank you so much. It's great that you have come to a positive outcome on this, because one can get into a bun fight, if I can refer to it that way, which happens sometimes with the foundation, and it then turns you away from these type of programs where there's a lot of benefits to be achieved from it. Has anyone got anything to add to what Yolandi said? Laurie,
Greg, if I could just comment, I think in South Africa, assessing community needs and involving communities in projects is particularly challenging, perhaps more so than in other countries. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think we have a big challenge with getting community involvement.
Okay. Julian says we have a challenge. Sabine, you?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, we were looking at doing something in the Mooiplaats community, and as it turned out, there are so many political issues at play between community leaders that we actually backed out because we can't be politically involved, and it's to the detriment of the people in the community if the leaders actually interfere and fight between each other. And it's just, it is very challenging, that's true. You have to find a project that does not go down that road where any politics are involved.
Okay, so I hear you. Laurie, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Greg. Just one point. You know, training is a very important component of a grant. Normally, it's almost, you could consider it an essential. Now, in our particular case, the grant was approved by our district, but David Massey came back and said, please provide us with a training manual, which we hadn't thought of. And so add that to your planning process, that if you are considering training as a component, spend the time to put a training manual together that is credible, understandable, and sustainable. Thanks.
Laurie, thank you. I think that's very good insight that you've given us. Just to go back to Sabile's matter, Caroline, are you on with us?
I am Greg.
Oh, Caroline, would you explain how you managed to get cooperation from the community that the global grant that you've been allocated?
You're talking about the one in Malusi. Yeah, I think that when it comes to the political side and the community side, it's really critical to get the community members involved. And I understand that not every community has a almost a formalized setup, and where we're working at the moment, it's an informal settlement. So it's not elected officials or anything, but they are respected members of the community. They do hold some sway. It's the senior members, and it's important to get a cross section as well of the community, so that you're not just representing one person's agenda. If you can get the local community on board, then really nobody's pretending we all have the same political views or on the same political interests, but we all are trying to just improve that area, improve that informal settlement. And, you know, if we try and, because we do have differences, but we try and just keep our eye on that ball. You know, that is what we're all trying to achieve. And we try and, you know, not get involved in the political side, but use the connections that you can make to get the permissions. That's important. You're not always going to get much help from the local municipality, but it's important that they don't actually stand in your way. So you need to engage early on. You need them to see. It's helpful if they already know Rotary. We worked with some of the local people on the Rotary Family Health Day, so that was helpful. You know, even though it was a different department, we had people from the Department of Health in the area working a little bit with us. Community health workers are a really strong asset. Again, not all areas have them, but it is a project of the Department of Health, and they do have community health workers. So if you can look for that, that's normally a huge help. They were invaluable to us, and they still are. They're a major part of our program. So I think that I hope that helps. Unless there was anything specifically you wanted me to address, Greg.
Okay, I've been moved to this breakout room. Hi, Caroline, how are you?
Nice to see your face. Hi.
Good. So I'm handling community. I'm not sure. Are you still in this? Yeah, you are still in this room. No, you're not hosting today.
No,
I thought you were. Okay. So it's community assessment. Hi, I'm Janine. I'm from the Rotary Club of White River, best part of the Lowveld. I like people to say hello.
Hello.
Thank you. Thanks. Community assessment. What I'm going to do is, there's been quite a bit of discussion already about how important it is. Greg mentioned it is the first step in grant. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a scenario and then ask that you explain what your next step would be. So the scenario is that your club receives a message from an overseas club. Okay, we all like getting those. One of their members was on holiday in your area and saw some children sitting under trees doing classwork. They spoke to the teacher and have decided they want to partner with you via a global grant structure to build classrooms. What would be your next step? Remembering the area we're discussing now is community assessment.
Well, do they need a classroom?
I think the need is there, yes, but then the engagement with the locals will be the first step.
Engagement how? What local?
Well, with the local community, the people in the community, and see if they can come to the party.
Okay.
To get their insight.
Maybe they don't want a classroom.
Maybe.
No, but I think the need for the classroom is already identified, because you see the students under a tree and not in a classroom. So the need is there, but it's to get the involvement of the locals to accept that they do need that classroom and get their take on how to get the classroom built.
I think perhaps you'd try and communicate with somebody from local government. You know, you've got to get an insight as to responsibility in that area, who you could possibly work with.
I also think that both Alton and Fiona have got good points. You know, Fiona's saying maybe they don't want one. Yes, absolutely, they do need it, but that might not be their highest priority. Maybe maybe a medical center or something is a higher priority.
Exactly. Beth, I saw you waving your hand there.
Yes. Right, you can hear me. I think also when we have thanked them for this wonderful offer and discovered whether it's a global or a district grant applying to help us with, the one place we must go first of all is to go and find what is the government's plan for that specific, has already put in place plans for things, and it's a sort of duplication. And I have many friends who are involved with the Department of Education, and apparently in many places there is a very quick reaction when a township or a informal settlement requests help. So a good place to go is to find out what government is planning to do in that area. And then you know you're not going to be duplicating something that already is being allocated some funding.
Okay.
That's the reason why I say maybe to speak to the locals in the area first and see, because some of them might be involved in something that's already been programmed that hasn't been shared with everybody, but getting their insight into what has actually happened in the area might be the first step.
Yes, but I also believe, but I must say that many times the community don't know what the plans are yet by government. So it's very good to use that source first of all for information.
Okay. Yeah, can you really rely on any plans that the government makes? Because so many times they might have planning, but it's not actually put into practice. So I would be very suspicious, even if there was a plan. I'm sorry if I'm a bit cynical about that, but yes, I don't know.
Actually, it's one way of getting growth.
Sorry, I feel it is very important to find out who that piece of earth belongs to, and to get municipal approval before you start building there. Because we have had a problem in our club before where we did build a community center and toilets and everything, and after years that piece of ground is still not, nobody is sure who it belongs to, and we still do not have documentation to say that it belongs to that specific project. It's very important.
So what I'm hearing from everyone is different ways of just speaking to various groups. Government was mentioned, community as a whole was mentioned, and then Jeline, you brought up the assets. If you have a look at community assessment, there's an amazing document on Rotary.org that outlines it all. There's a number of different aspects that are used, or different tools that are used. Asset inventory, which in Jeline's case is critical because it identifies what assets there are, but also remembering assets aren't always physical assets. It could be skills, things like that. Running surveys, doing interviews. One of the things I'd like to point out though is, and that goes back to Fiona, you hit it right on the nail at the very beginning. This is someone possibly, I said overseas, probably Western based, coming into our area, which is Africa, putting a Western connotation on what is actually required by saying there's kids under trees at the school. I don't know, we had enough classrooms and we did some of our subjects outside under the tree. It didn't, you know, it was just that particular subject was better handled outside. The person they spoke to was a teacher, which is not a full representation of the community. It's a teacher who, let's be serious here, if you're a teacher in a school, where would you want the asset to come? To the school. So you need to look, when you're doing a community assessment, it's wonderful. We're very happy with all of this, but go right back to all the community, not just the leaders. Speak to the different groups, maybe speak to them in smaller focus areas so that you can get their take and not just what the leadership is saying. School teachers will want classrooms. Nurses will want facilities at the clinic. Speak to the broader spectrum. And then go back to your partner and either say, yes, this is a great project, it's going to work, nail on the head, or no, this community needs, I don't know, playground.
I'd like to just add something, a word of caution. There was a fantastic project started by a now defunct Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of Bramley in District 9300. They were based in Bramley, Johannesburg, and their project was about 160 kilometers north in the Winterveld. And they had two champions in the Rotary Club who traveled up there every single week. They started a beautiful vegetable garden. And as long as the Rotary Club had a representative up there every single week, the vegetable gardens progressed and grew and was beautiful. One of them died. The second one now had to do it every week, and he became ill. Within 2 months, the project had failed. Don't pick on a project because it's a great project if it's too far away and you battle to police it, for want of a better word. You need to be able to be on site as often as possible, because our local communities out there in the platteland areas are not as organized as people tend to believe and tend to think. Thank you.
I think, thanks, Tom. That's definitely a sustainability issue, and I'm not sure if you've done sustainability yet, but part of your initial community assessment is finding out the skill set required for sustainability so Rotary can have an exit strategy. Most projects, you don't want them forever. You want to go in, do your do what needs to be done, and then have an exit strategy. Sybil, I saw you raised a hand. You've changed your mind, or you still on mute?
All I wanted to say, I agree with what was said there, what Tom was saying. That basically, I'm in agreement.
Rihanna?
I just want to say is we're actually busy with a project at a school that we've been working with for about 15 years already. And it's the current teacher has grown the school from 85 to 700 and something students. And I just think that, yes, if you do good research and you stick to areas where you can work, because now we've got, I'm thinking about that community core, because I think I'm going to start a community core there, because one of the churches are involved, and the informal settlements around the school are all involved. And we are actually busy doing a building there now. But what we did is we're fortunate to have quite a few architects in our club. So they've done the buildings, we've handed in the plans, we haven't handed in the plans to the community, showed them what's happening and what we're planning to do. It's gone to the Department of Education now to make sure that they approved it, and then we'll hand it in for municipality approval. So you have to follow the steps if you do something big like that.
No,
and you have to
100%.
involve the community. You have to.
100%. And the reality is it starts with good groundwork.
Yes.
Everyone can tell you stories of projects that have failed because there was not community involvement, there was not community buy-in, there was not sustainability falls over because they're reliant on a Rotarian to go out every week and make sure plants are watered.
Yeah.
So it's this first step, your community assessment, is a critical step. It's also become obligatory for Rotary International. You will not get a grant if you have not done a community assessment. And the assessments must be conducted slightly formally. You know, if you have a group meeting, someone must take minutes and take notes of what the person said. Include the whole community. As we said earlier, my scenario was a school, and the person interviewed was a teacher. That's a no-brainer. I see a lot of people here without videos on, and I'm sure you have zero bandwidth, but I'd love to hear some comments from you. Do we have any people here without their videos on that would like to comment? Looking here, Cookie or Marlene, Alan. Oh, Malta, yes.
It's related to your example given about building a school. I had a similar project in Livingstone, Zambia. And when it came to realization of the project, we had been given restrictions from Rotary because we were not allowed to build everything we would like to. For example, things with an ablution block were allowed, but normal buildings without were not allowed. Are those restrictions still on, and where do we find them?
I think I know that from the grant side, there are certain restrictions. I'm not 100% up to date with what they are, as they do change. Carolyn probably knows more about that than I do. But generally, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Carolyn, generally, if it is a government responsibility, then Rotary tends not to do too much of it. I may be wrong though.
I can just comment on what his question was. I'm not sure that there's a difference if it's government or not. I haven't come across that.
Is it?
But yes, there definitely is. When it's a global grant, if you're doing a grant with another club, just a club to club, these restrictions don't apply. We're speaking about a global grant. Definitely no buildings. You can build ablutions and you can renovate. So there's no, if there is an existing one, I think part of the problem comes from ownership, which has been discussed, and then also from what do you do with it in the future? Who looks after it? But yes, so definitely, don't look at building other than ablution blocks, but renovating is fine.
Does that answer your question, Malta? Thanks, Carolyn. I did see a hand flash at the top, but I seem to.
I was going to say, we have a project that we do for a little a foster home, and just going back to the building. So what was allowed was a container, and that worked quite well. So it was a container.
There was a way around, so it's not bricks and mortar, it was a container.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Was that a global grant or not?
Sorry, oh, that was the one there. We did submit a global grant for that, but it didn't involve enough of the community. So unfortunately, that became more of a district grant.
Okay, because I do know at the moment containers are not looked on favourably by the Rotary Foundation for global.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, because it really serves a purpose. It's not looked on favourably.
Yes.
Okay. But I think coming back to community assessment, it is the first step. Think outside the box. The scenario, going back to the scenario again, it immediately you started thinking school. So like I reiterated earlier, please look outside the box and look at the community as a whole. And if a school is not their primary objective or their primary need, if it's 2 or 3 down on the list, sure, consider it still. But always remember to, first of all, get the buy-in. One of the other Rotarians actually had a very interesting phrase, which I told him I'm going to repeat. It's a guy called George, and he said, you should use the community assessment almost as a nursery for Rotary as well. It's also about the community getting to know who Rotary is. And just remember during your assessment period, make no promises. It's not a time to say we are coming here, we are going to put money in, we are going to do this and that. It's a time of finding out what's needed, what can be done, what possible partnerships can be built. Because if promises are made at that level, and then, for example, you go to apply for a grant and you don't get it, then you have to go back to the community and go, well, sorry, we didn't get it. So use this. This is quite an interesting, it's quite interesting, it's well worth it, and it's great to get to know the people around you as well. Great to get to know who works in your communities, how it all links together. And they've given me a warning, so they're probably going to knock me out any second, and this becomes like this waiting period. If you're not quite
Right, I've been beamed into the next session. Hi, everybody. It's quite remarkable with this technology. You're sitting in one room and you suddenly find yourself in another room with no aid of yourself. Welcome to the Sustainability Breakaway. The 20 minutes going fast, so I'm going to just run through it quite fast. Greg went through the guide to global grants. The information is all there. But I think what we want to do here is tease out some thought and some discussion and hear what people's experiences are. I think the important thing I'm going to get away with is that the meaning of sustainability is providing long-term solutions to community problems that community members themselves can support after grant funding. I think we need to really dwell on that, and that needs to be built into our business, our project plan, into our financial plan, and everything that we do with the grants. That's the critical part, is actually understanding that. Then I'm going to ask anybody that would like to kick off with sustainability comments. You've heard that, and within that context. Beth, nice to see you.
It's very important before we commit ourselves to check what Rotary allows and what the local authority allows. In private schools, they still will allow a container, maybe for a food distribution place or a library. But in government schools, you are not allowed containers. That is something you need to check with the Department of Education. Otherwise, you go and you erect something or provide a container for something, and then the government comes along and says, that's illegal, and you've wasted all that money. So I think those are important issues that we should know about in our own local area where we're operating, so that we are clear when we approach the person who wants the help and the international partners.
Thanks, Beth. I think something when we start engaging communities, something which we don't find in the RI documents is terminology and that we use here in the district, such as stakeholder involvement and getting involved with communities and understanding the interactions where the political interactions come in and communities. So we also need to bear that in mind. Any other hand, I'm looking at everyone sitting quiet.
Sorry, Charles, if I can just, sorry, if I could just interrupt, I don't have a question. There was a lot of people are commenting that there's a lot of background noise, so I'm afraid I've muted everyone other than Charles. Would you please just unmute yourself if you need to speak? Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Laurie?
Charles, yeah, Laurie from Johannesburg. one of the aspects which comes to the fore in sustainability is you normally want to be able to set up a situation where members of the community can carry on with the project by running it as a business or something like that. And then you're faced with the problem that the people you're dealing with don't have a clue as to how to run a business. And we've been dealing, our international partner on previous and currently new global grants is somebody from Fort Lauderdale, Gail, and she's connected up with a crowd called Junior Achievement, which are based in South Africa. And what they have is a series of training modules which actually teach people how to be entrepreneurs or business people in a very simple way. And it's good to know that if you're faced with this problem, we do have solutions for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Any other hands? While everyone's thinking, something that came up in the previous session, and from my own experience, when we start talking about the stakeholder engagements with boreholes, we had the case of where we identified and thought putting in a hand pump would be the solution. The community rejected it as child labor, and we ended up by having to revisit that. The other one that had power, we found was outstanding power, and the power wasn't available, and they accepted a hand pump because the water was a priority at that stage. And in the other one, where there was power, the community said they would pay for the power, and they would raise that through their funding, and if we just did the boreholes and that. So within pretty much the same district, different communities seeing things in a very different light. And I think that's why every project, you can't, from the stewardship committee, I've said quite clearly there that no copy paste. You need to have clubs terminology, communities understanding and terminology that is documented and that you actually understand the community that you're working with. So just for what that's worth, let's get Rihanna, is that your hand up?
No. But I would like to say something. We've had the experience at the school that we're working with, and I've actually just said it before you came in, is that we've been working with the school for about 15 years. And we want to do work there. We wanted to do the inside of an industrial kitchen. And we applied for a grant, and it was shot down because I said it's not a sustainable project. But us on the ground have been working with that school for 15 years. And in 2016, we put our first veggie tunnels in there. And after that, a few veggie tunnels. And they're all still used, and they still looked after, and they still kept in a very, very good condition. So for me, it is a sustainable project because the kids obviously need the food in that area. There's 5 informal settlements around it. So how do you get that over to people in RI that's not on the ground here and doesn't know how it works here?
I think, Rihanna, that is a challenge, and I think that's what I was alluding to earlier as well, is one needs to look at how one structures your documentation and how you engage with your communities and put your paperwork together. But I'm happy to engage you off the forum at the moment because I don't want to get into too much detail. I saw Tom come up with your hand, Tom. Tom, unmute yourself.
In a previous session, I quoted a case of a failed project, but I think it was a little bit misinterpreted. What I'm saying is, under sustainability, you can't leave it to one Rotarian in the club or one person on the ground in the community. You have to make sure that you've got a fallback in case that one person loses interest or dies. Rotarians are renowned for dying because they do get older. And you also have the problem in the local communities where people move on. He's unemployed now, so he's happy to work flat out in your vegetable garden, but he gets a job tomorrow. So you need in your sustainability to plan for succession so that you don't rely on one or two champions on either side of the fence who may well fall by the wayside. So yes, your plan, your MOU, and all the wonderful documentation that works in civilized countries doesn't always work on the continent of Africa. So we need to make sure that we plan slightly differently in that we've got the dedication and the commitment from both sides of the fence. And that is what will keep the project going.
Thanks, Tom. It's the first time I've heard you refer to yourself as being old. Nong, did you have your hand up there? Any other hands? I'm missing a screen here. Sorry, has there been a hand on the other screen that I have missed? No discussion.
No hands there.
Nong, is that you trying to come on?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Vice Governor Diana. Thank you for the wonderful debate. I can see with projects, I've been looking at the way our church is doing projects, and I spoke the other day. Community engagement is key, but for sustainability, I see you've got to look at project champions within the communities that are so active, that see the people that are not tainted with our integrity. So we need to go look for project champions now that can work with that right from the beginning and right through the journey of the project without us sitting with problems with the scorpions or whatever at a later stage where we have to babysit them at all times. So it's critical to go look for those people, maybe in our churches or social clubs or whatever. And even if they don't have the time to join Rotary, they can hold hands with us right through the journey. And we can go quickly from a shrinking district to a very growing district by finding them and saying, it doesn't take so much time out of you to really get involved in Rotary. And maybe they can find a friend that can join a Rotary club, even if they don't have the time. They belong to many social clubs.
Thanks for that, Nong. Any other hand?
Yes, I want to throw something in there as well. I believe, yes, the community involvement in any project that we're looking at doing to keep the sustainability, they need to be involved from the get-go. So getting the community involved in anything that we want to try and do is the only way that we're going to get it to really carry on, by getting their involvement in the project as well.
Thanks, Elton. Cookie, did I see your hand go up?
Hi, Charles. Hi, everybody. My take is I would go into the community and look at projects that are already ongoing. I mean, in every community, you find projects already ongoing. So I would look at joining or approaching the pioneers of those projects, because being in these, let me look at the locations. If you go into the townships, there's always something going on. So go in and talk to the pioneer of the projects that are going on, that are already going on, and find out if they would need assistance in running these projects, as opposed to going in and saying, oh, they don't have a garden, let's go in as Rotary and start a garden. So I would go in and look at the projects and talk to the pioneers and say, you know, would you like assistance, or do you need assistance? You know, and because, you know, once you pull out, it will sustain, because there was already somebody
or a group of people involved in this particular in a particular project. So that's the way I would approach it.
Thanks, Cookie. Sybil?
Yes, I think I agree with Cookie. It makes a lot of sense, especially if maybe your club is not that big, to try and partner up with other NGOs or groups that are already involved. During this whole session now this morning, I was thinking again, we have that group that is very involved and successful in our area. It's about the Hanops River revival, the cleanup of the Hanops River. And while it's not just about the physical cleaning up every time there's a flood, it goes further, because one has to actually engage with Tembisa, where most of the rubbish generated actually floods down from Tembisa. And I think there's a big need to educate people and find ways of all this rubbish not just getting tossed out and then ending up in the river. It's just an idea or thought. But, this is in our area. So I'm sure Rotary could actually get involved.
I think you have a huge opportunity there with the coming year, with the environmental focus area being added. I think that could generate a nice grant there. Any other hands that I've missed? Tom? Tom, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, there we go. I don't want to sound negative. People think that I'm negative. I'm not. I'm very positive, really. But people talk about containers. Charles and I have been involved in the importation of containers for many years. And the big danger that people tend to forget is that the containers that we make available, either from a humanitarian center or from Charles and his club's projects, are containers that are received in South Africa on their last voyage, which means the containers are already condemned for seaborne use. So if you're going to use a container, make sure you inspect the container you want to take. You may have to replace all the floorboards. You may have to do a panel beating job. So it's not just a case of taking the container and putting a couple of windows and a door in. It can be a very costly event. We're actually looking for the museum, not for containers anymore, but from buying a ready-built unit, which will look better and also save a hell of a lot of money in repairs and reconditioning. That's my bit for you, Charles.
Thanks, Tom. Any other hands there? We have a couple of minutes, probably 3 minutes left. Any further interaction? Tell me a question on the, hi Beth. Beth?
I just wanted to agree with the comment made by someone, the importance of getting to know the community. You see, relationship is so important in life and anything. So if we build a relationship with the community beforehand, then we have much more assurance that things will go smoothly and it will be sustained. And so as leaders in our clubs, we should remember that the only way we succeed in life is having good relationships with those we want to work with.
Thanks, Beth. Just any comment on using local businesses? It's one of the points that's raised in the sustainability document. What is the experience of using local businesses for projects? either we're not using local businesses or people are not wanting to talk. Rihanna?
If you say local, do you mean in the area that you're working?
Yeah.
Those. Mine's a little bit wider, but with that townships project that I do, I've got a good support of 3 different businesses. And one of it is a very big corporate and 2 others are smaller ones. No, 2 of them are big corporates. And it actually does work well. They do what they're supposed to be doing, and they help out even more than what you expect them to do. So for me, it was good. But like I said, it's bigger businesses, so I don't know if it's exactly what you were looking for.
No, I think the thing that I'm trying to get at is by using local businesses, CSI and so on is getting exposure so that people are aware of what's happening. Because very often local businesses don't know what's happening. They're not aware of it. And then they hand their money to other projects or to bigger groups that are doing CSI and BEE and all the rest of it, where if they knew about local projects, they could actually spend it and invest it directly in those projects. So we mustn't exclude the CSI options from our plans. I see we are going to be pulled into Greg again, beamed out. Thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to some more of these discussions on Zoom in the future. Thank you.
Feeding schemes, education and nutrition. We've sorted that out. George, are you okay with the responses that you got?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robin, the hippo rollers, we discussed that. That was a project where the hippo roller was not regarded as being great for a global grant, but it's proved to be a very, very successful project. And my recommendation was that we look at doing it as a district grant and getting international partners into it and doing what we can there. Francis, you brought up the issue about need and merit. We've got to be very careful when it does come to projects that the need is obviously there, but is the merit there as well? And that's where we look at the sustainability, that it's not a handout, that there's an educational element to it, that there's training involved. That way it will make your grants that much more successful. Feeding schemes in schools, this is something that we do quite a lot of, and we've got to try and make some way to bring it about. And it was suggested by Alice, where she said was we should tie up community development together with feeding schemes, where the community has gone and created the food and the elements that will bring about education and nutrition that is so important to our children. Guys, I'm sorry that we didn't have more time to do a lot more, to explain a lot more of the issues, but I thank you. Without your support, without the support of the team who have been phenomenal, and I'd like to mention Grace for the support that she gave and the control that she had over this whole meeting and the time that she gave to us, to Past District Governor Charles, for he being there in the breakout rooms and providing that information to you, and hopefully it was of great benefit. To Janine Talyard, who handled the other breakout room, phenomenal commitment from her as well. I hope I'm not sounding like Trump, but we're running out of time and I don't want to keep it much longer. I also like to acknowledge Past District Governor Okomo from Kenya, whose slides I used and helped me, Elizabeth Lamberti's slides, and Rotary International for being there to support us. Guys, thank you so much for giving up your time. I know we've gone over it, but I hope you've all enjoyed it. The presentations will be available online. Those of you who need those particular slides from me, sorry, let me rephrase. The video will be available, so you'll be able to show it to your clubs. If you want to do a presentation and you want to use my slides, please contact me and I will send them to you. So yeah, with pleasure. Guys, thank you so much. Please remember the foundation. Let's get our Rotarians donating to the foundation, because 3 years down the line, we want to be strong again. We want to be able to do a lot more global grant projects. Thank you to all of you. Without you, this wouldn't have been successful. Thank you. Bye.